So there's this thing called Bluesky, which, in case you're not familiar with it, is a relatively new social media platform. It's been around a couple of years or so in development, and they've been, at first they were letting people join by invitation only, and then I guess they opened up at some point with the past couple of years or so to where pretty much anyone could join. And I'd forgotten that I'd already joined. So anyway, I apparently rejoined yesterday or today, and you know had been testing it out for a while. Just hadn't joined it, but had been testing it out and have been doing a lot of comparing and contrasting between Bluesky and Twitter, or X as it's known. I knew I should have brought it probably. Anyway, and so the inevitable comparison questions come up. You know, how are they different? How are they similar? And of course, which one is overall better? And in my view, as brief as it has been so far, look, Bluesky is basically a kind of clone in design of Twitter. Let's not beat around the bush here and pretend that it's some novel new design. It's definitely not. It's basically, a kind of knockoff looking site of Twitter or X, right? It's basically a short messaging app that lets you upload media and do all the things you can do on X. Right? The difference is that it's a kind of a decentralized platform. And by that, it means that it's open source, first of all, and you can host your own server, a lot like Mastodon, which, if you're not familiar with, is another social media platform that's kind of similar to Twitter, but the onboarding process at Mastodon makes it far less popular, and that's why Mastodon, I believe, still only has around 1 million or so people who've signed up or are actively users or whatever. It's, I like Mastodon a lot. It's kind of cool, but it just hasn't really picked up any great traction, despite this initial burst of traction they got a couple of years ago after Elon Musk bought Twitter and made a bunch of changes that really upset some users on Twitter. So people went looking for different platforms, and one of them that was kind of having its heyday moment was Mastodon, which is very decentralized and open source and all that stuff, and kind of cool. But again, the onboarding is not so simple at Mastodon. I mean, it's simple if you're like a person who spends a lot of time online and you get tech. But if you're the average user, it's more complicated. You have to choose a server, and it's not the same as like you just sign on to Twitter and you have your Twitter account, or you sign on to Facebook and you have your Facebook account. You know what I mean? And Bluesky, you basically sign on, and the default server is automatically selected for you. It's the main Bluesky default server. But you can, if you have one, set your own server, and you can create one there on the fly too, if you have all the right information to do it. So, while it's not 100% as straightforward as signing on to Twitter, because you still have to, either just accept that you're on the default server, which is actually fine for most people, or you have to sit there and create your own. But then that can confuse some people, like, should I create it? Should I not create it? What's the difference? They don't necessarily know the difference. But other than that, the features are very similar. Of course, there are plenty of other things on Twitter you can do now that you can't yet do on these other services. For example, Twitter pays some content creators, who obviously pay for verification, If you pay Twitter a certain amount of money, then you can earn money from your posts, and you can earn money from, you know, people subscribing to you and this kind of thing. And you can't do that yet on Bluesky or Mastodon. Maybe that'll come in the future. Who knows? But, you know, in that sense, X is obviously more developed because it's, you know, been around longer, and they've been, ever since Elon Musk bought it, he's been looking at ways to monetize it because, you know, even though he basically helped, you know, win the U.S. presidential election, not insignificantly, with all the, you know, promotion he was doing of the Trump campaign and everything. So you could argue, well, that was a very worthwhile investment. You know, yes, 44 billion was probably twice the measured price of what Twitter was worth when he bought it. But at the same time, what's it worth to be, you know, such a close advisor to the now president-elect and have all this influence and everything else? You know, be given the title of co-lead or whatever guy who's going to run the supposed Department of Government Efficiency, which is an outside group of advisors that are going to advise the president and the government about how to waste less money. What's that worth? That kind of influence. What's it worth all the tax breaks he's probably going to get? What's it worth all the, you know, government contracts he's going to get? Probably more than the sum of the 22B that he, you know, spent additionally, that he might not have spent had he bought it at the kind of market price. So yeah, arguably very worthwhile investment by Mr. Musk to have bought Twitter even at twice the price that it was supposedly worth, even if he doesn't successfully turn a profit with Twitter compared to the size of his investment. But if he does, well, you know, yay. Good for the Twitter business, and good for the people who like to create content there. I will say, it depends on the person. Some people love the changes that have been made there. Some people, you know, obviously, there's a lot of people that love the changes that have been made there do happen to be people that lean politically to the right, and they like the more conservative flair that the content has. And ironically, they love the so-called free speech, which isn't free speech because private platforms have nothing to do with free speech. But people will argue that it does, even though it doesn't. But, you know, there are some people who love those changes, some people who don't really care, and some people who really don't like those changes. And those typically tend to be people who are more on the left, or, you know, whatever, who feel like ever since Elon Musk bought it, there's less free speech. There's more suppression of their views. And just generally that the platform has kind of become an echo chamber for extreme right-wing content and all kinds of stuff. I will reserve my judgment on that in terms of, I'm not going to spew forth my judgment on that in this video because it's really irrelevant. From a technical perspective, I think Bluesky is very nice and has a lot of potential, but it does have a long way to go. And considering it only has now reportedly 18 million users, which is not bad, but it, you know, still relatively small compared to X, which has something like 650 million apparently monthly users now, which is actually up significantly from when Musk bought it. I think it was around 420 or so million. So it's certainly an improvement on X. It's also an improvement on Bluesky, and time will tell which will do the best. Cheers. Bye.